Okay, we are live, I think. As always, I have to ask if you can hear me because I never trust anything. Never trust tech, never trust anything. And I'm having some weird things happening with my sign in, blah, 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 making me crazy. So first things first, can you hear me? Am I here? Ground control to Major Tom. Am I, in fact, loud and clear? Huzzah! Huzzah can hear and see. Hearing and seeing are both very useful things when doing a live stream. So, awesome. 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 Hello, everyone. Fans of the Broken Empires. Friends, foes, and family? Whatever. Hello. Hello, hello. Today, we are going to be talking about Chapter 12, Travel of the Broken Empire's core rulebook, which is now done in proofreading, but it's done. I will say this before we begin. The book is looking really, really good. No, I don't have an exact release date. I'm not going to tell you an exact date because if I told you an exact date and I'm wrong because of things out of my control, I'm going to look like I'm lying to you or I don't know what I'm talking about or whatever. In any event, it's not a good look. But I can tell you this. It's going to be a lot sooner than some of you think, because I've seen what you're talking about on Discord and in various forums and stuff like this. It's going to be a lot sooner than you think, which is good, because it's already a lot later than, we had hoped, because the world, man, and that's how things work. But it's going to be a lot sooner than you think, at least the digital files. Of course, making the physical copies takes time because you have to actually, build it and then ship it across the sea and then distribute it and stuff like that takes a little longer. But very exciting stuff. It's looking very good. And today we're going to be talking about the travel chapter. Now, why am I particularly excited about the travel chapter? Well, I'll tell you. Because travel is one of those things that I see so often in many tabletop RPG discussions, or just rather RPG discussions. That's what I've said before in these streams. I'm not calling it TTRPG because we were here first before the computer games, so we're just RPG. If you're talking about a computer game like Baldur's Gate, it's CRPG. Anyway, I've heard it talked about many, many times in RPG discussions about travel being, I just hand wave that. Oh, travel, we just skip to the dungeon. And I've always had a problem with that in the kind of games I run. Because the kind of games I run are based around the idea that you're exploring a world. And if you're exploring the world, you have to, explore the world by traveling through it. And I get why in the old days they hand-wave travel, because if you look at the old rules from like D&D, AD&D, or the sort of updated OSR rules from something like Old School Essentials, which is basically an amalgamation of all the BECMI style rules largely, right? If you look at their wilderness exploration rules, what they're basically trying to track is, do you have enough food for the journey? And how many fights do you get in on the way? Now, to me, that is the base sort of entry-level version of how to travel through a world. Because there are so many more things that can make the journey feel immersive than just a fight. So I get why they did it, because it was about resource management, right? It was about, what kind of dangers are you going to face? Because we think, dangers must be combat-related. Of course, we all know that there are many, many, many kinds of challenges possible for the player characters other than just combat, and a travel system should not only incorporate the idea that there's many types of challenges, but should also immerse the players into that world and make them feel like they are traveling through it. Now, again, this is a matter of taste and style. Not everybody shares it. And you may be the type of person that's like, I just hand wave it, I don't care, I just want to get to the dungeon. But as I said before, the Broken Empires RPG is not really a dungeon crawler game. It's not really about that. God knows there's a million games out there that are about that. So if you are of that type who just wants to hand wave skip to the action, so to speak, let me try and convince you otherwise. I was about to say this chapter probably isn't for you, but no, let me try and convince you otherwise through the presentation of this chapter, because what I have found is with my journey rules, my players have universally said, and this is from players from all over North America, have universally said to me, after playing through a journey, they've said, wow, I feel like I was actually on that journey. I feel like I was there. And that was the goal, to really immerse the players and make them feel like they were there. So I will say this about the journey system. It was heavily inspired by the One Ring. A lot of people have problems with the One Ring for various reasons. I don't. I thought the One Ring was great, the first edition. Haven't played the second edition, but I've read it. But that said, I can understand why people said, oh, well, the travel rules are One Ring. I don't like them. And it seemed to me that a lot of what happened was we saw these people who maybe didn't get it look at the One Ring procedure, because it is a procedure, and so is the Broken Empire's travel system, and reduced it just to a series of dice rolls. Oh, well, it's just a series of dice rolls. So the guide rolls, and then you have, then the scout has to, it's just a bunch of dice rolls. Of course, you could say that about anything in a role-playing game. You could say that about combat. Guess what, guys? It's just a series of dice rolls. To hit, damage, it's just a series of dice rolls, isn't it? If you reduce it to that, then yeah, it's going to suck. But I looked at the One Ring and went, this is an entry point into Middle-earth. This is a way to draw my players into Middle-earth. And that's exactly what we did. Now, I house ruled it, of course, because naturally I did. And a lot of those house rules, or those concepts of the house rules, made it into my own journey system. So I will say this, that the journey system is, in fact, a procedure. And if you reduce it to just a series of meaningless rolls, it's going to feel like just a series of meaningless rolls. But if you use it in the spirit in which it is presented, it has the potential to really bring your players into the world, which is the whole point. So I'm not going to tell you every little part of this. I'm going to show you sort of the main gist of it because, I don't want to give away all the secrets. But I did want to share this because we're very excited about it, and I think it looks great, and it works really, really well. And maybe I can convince some of you out there that you should give it a shot. And if not, that's fine too. The game is big enough to accommodate all kinds of play styles, even if you're not someone that loves the travel thing. But before we get there, let's hear a word from our sponsor. No, not our sponsor. I'm just looking at the chat here to see. We've got lots of folks on here, which is great. Hello, everyone from all over the world. Catalonia, Sweden, Switzerland, Tennessee. Wow, North Carolina, everywhere. The Southwest Desert. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so, yeah. Oh, there we go. Jamie asks, where is it? Do you know the exact date on your end? I just said, man, I can't give an exact date. Sooner than you may think. All right. Okay, so hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Let's get the show on the road. All right, so first of all, this is the chapter divider page. And again, of course, the spine of the book is right down the middle here. These are 2-page spreads. This is an image of Simon, Edbert, and Arn from Me, Myself, and I traveling their way, presumably through season 1, because that was the only time they were all together like this. I love this picture, and I'll tell you why I love this picture. This picture encapsulates a lot of the things that for me is very important in travel. Now, you might think, 3 dudes walking through a forest, who cares? These people are walking out of a dark forest towards the light. There is evidence of life everywhere. There's birds in the sky. There's the blooming of flowers. There's the sense of perspective that this is the beginning. They're taking their first steps into a much larger world. As you can see, the perspective goes all the way down the river to the mountains. To me, this is like awe-inspiring. This is the kind of thing that when I think about traveling through a fantasy world, a medieval world, this is what I'm picturing. So for me, this is a highly inspiring picture. So I love it, and I do love it. All right, so I do want to just start by reading you this intro here because it really does encapsulate kind of the feel that I believe in. So travel can be one of the most satisfying and exhilarating aspects of the fantasy role-playing game experience. It is also, tragically, one of the most underused and underappreciated, despite being a staple of so many flavors of fantasy. What would The Lord of the Rings have been if Tolkien had just skipped past all that travel stuff? A book about 10 pages long is what? A thin and stretched experience, like butter scraped over too much bread. Instead, we get one of the richest and most epic fantasy experiences of the modern age. Elric of Melniboné's entire saga takes place while wandering the Young Kingdoms. His story would be so much less interesting if he had never left the Dragon Isle. The epic journeys in A Song of Ice and Fire reveal a robust, breathing world spread across a vast and meticulously detailed landscape, bringing us deeper into the story with every step. So it can be in an RPG. Travel is the very stuff of which adventure is made, and I absolutely believe that 100%. Now, The system. There are two separate systems in the game. There's the Journey system and the Hex March system. The Journey system is the one that's most inspired by the One Ring. It's an abstracted procedure that covers many, many, many days at once and is punctuated by moments of extreme tension, like checking for infected wounds and dealing with events. We're going to come to events in a second, but events in the Journey system, or in the Hex March system for that matter, are things that happen to you on the road. They're not necessarily combats. They're not necessarily bad things. They're just things. And there's all kinds of ways and random tables that we have in this chapter, which I will show you at least a part of. So that's the Journey system. It abstracts many elements to portray a long trek towards a predetermined destination, typically at about 100 miles or more, right? If you're doing less than that, or if you're just doing free exploration of the wilderness, like a hex crawl, you can do that. It's a system called the Hex March system. This is focused on the daily rigors of travel, trudging along hex by hex, keeping watch at camp, enduring changing weather, making ration, wound recovery, and hostile encounter rolls, dealing with more frequent events, and others. This is for if you're wanting to experience the wilderness step by step rather than focusing on the destination. So those are the two different systems. We're really going to focus on the Journey here, not so much the Hex March. Okay. So travel basics. Let's talk about this because this applies to anything. So each hex on the overland map are 10-mile hexes. Okay. The party's going to choose a destination and they chart a course to it. This is the same in a Journey as it is in a Hex March, because even if you're only going 2 hexes away, that's still a destination for the day, right? And before you set out, the party has to assigns travel duties. This is pretty important, right? Guide, quartermaster, scout. The guide uses a track skill to determine movement. The quartermaster uses survival to manage supplies and fatigue. Again, it's abstracted into this one role, as we'll see. And the scout uses perception to prepare for unexpected encounters. This section right here, multiple duties and helping, this is going to tie into a question that my patron Dan has. So a single character may take on multiple duties, but each additional duty imposes a -20 to each duty skill. Each duty may be supported by one helper, yada, yada, yada. So what Dan had asked me was, last time you said a solo player only needs one character, which sounds great, as of course it makes it easier to handle and focus on the roleplay. But if you get a chance this afternoon, can you mention how a solo player deals with the 3 roles of scout, quartermaster, and guide? So the answer is, if you're a solo player, there is actually, and I talk about this in the solo role-playing chapter in the book, there's a talent that you should take for free called Lone Wanderer. And what that does, it basically makes you Aragorn. It makes you, you can do all of these, you can fulfill all of these roles without that -40 penalty if you're doing both, right? Or all 3, rather. So that's how you would handle that. Keeping time, the standard movement rate on foot or by boat is 2 hexes per day, so 20 miles per day, 3 if mounted. You can push that. You can do a forced march if you need to. But that's the standard. Now, I will say this as well. A lot of games, and for very good reason, handle moving through the wilderness as a hex by hex thing, and they look at travel rate based on terrain and all of this stuff. Now, terrain is factored in to my system, but it is not the defining feature. And there's reasons for that too. There is actually an option if you want to do purely terrain-based movement rates. I have that as an option, which we'll take a quick look at. But the idea is that terrain is only one of the many things that's going to affect the central idea of the journey, which is how tired or fatigued is the party by the time they reach their destination. That's the central question of the journey. How exhausting is it? How tiring is it? So terrain is worked into the fatigue tables, which is something we determine when we get to the quartermaster section. Okay, so it is slightly different than a lot of RPGs how they handle overland travel. Although I will say my Hex March system is a lot closer to that, although it's still kind of a unique thing. All right, before we get back to this, I just want to go back to the chat to see where we're at. People are happy with the art, which is great. So excited for the game. Thanks for the peeks. You are very welcome. What a beautiful layout. I love the fact that all of the protagonists from your Me, Myself, and Die seasons are the illustrations of the book. Yeah, I mean, obviously I wanted to take advantage of that, so you will see illustrations of scenes from the series all throughout the book. And if you're not a Me, Myself, and Die watcher, that's not going to mean anything special to you. But if you are, you're going to recognize little Easter eggs in there, which is kind of cool. It is. I don't have time to watch right now. Just wanted to say hi and mention that I can't wait to watch this stream later. The travel chapter, heck yeah, awesome. Well, enjoy it when you finally get back to us. Most of the action in your solo games occurs while traveling. That is absolutely true. The heart of my entire series, pretty much all 4 of them, is what happens on the road. It's the travel, and this is especially exemplified in season 1 with Simon, especially at the beginning. It's not just especially the beginning. It's the entire season is about the journey. Again, I go back to the Lord of the Rings reference. The Lord of the Rings is one giant journey from start to finish. The entire story is one giant epic journey, mind you, with many, many branches. But ultimately, it's about getting from A to B, right? All right. Not sure if you remember the AD&D player character record sheet cover art. I believe it was Jeff Easley. It reminds me of this travel art. I don't exactly remember it, but cool. I forget which of our artists did this, but it was great work. Are the rules around day or night travel higher risk events at night? Sort of. Day and night comes into it when we get to the event, as we'll see. Wow, lots of questions here, including Grognard's question. Do you know what else is kind of cool? Wielding 2 shields. Again, private joke for those of you who don't know what the hell we're talking about. All right, are these rules valid for sea travel as well? Sort of. These rules are more for overland travel, or if you're on a boat on a river. There is a naval combat appendix in the game, which is naval combat. But in terms of traveling by sea, no, these rules don't, because you don't really need that if you're traveling by sea. Because if you're on a giant ship, first of all, there's a crew, which presumably, you might be a part of, but you're not the ones that are the crew. You're not making the decisions, and you go for long stretches with just nothing, right? Maybe some weather, maybe, I don't know, a sea monster or something. But these are all things that can be handled without the need of this procedure system. So no, that's not really a focus of this. So we will return to what the focus of these rules are. So there are 8 steps of the journey leg. Now, traveling any amount of hexes is known as a leg, okay? There's typically several legs to a given journey, right? So the first thing you do is plan the route. That's very important. Then you make the travel lore rolls, and I'll explain what all of this means as we go. Then the guide makes his track roll and moves on the map. The quartermaster makes a survival roll, which is going to deal with fatigue and going to determine how tired everyone becomes on that particular leg. Then we check for infection if anybody has any open wounds, because that can happen on the road. Describe the leg as probably the most important step. This is particularly for the GM, because it's the GM's job to immerse the players. So this is a crucial step in here. Then the scout makes a perception roll, and we determine the event, whatever that is. And then either we change into daily time, in other words, we drop out of the journey sequence, and there's very specific reasons why you might want to do that, or you begin a new leg and continue on. Okay, so let us look. Oh, and this piece of art here is a wonderful piece of art as well. Speaking of traveling by ship, there you go, or boat. See, I imagine this is coming downriver towards a coastal settlement. I love this picture. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about planning the route, okay? So essentially, the player's got to plan the route. Now, what are they going to take into consideration? They're going to take terrain into consideration, because they know if they're moving through difficult terrain like hills or mountains or swamps or anything like that, it's going to be more fatiguing. So it's contingent upon the players to try and figure out what the most, what the least fatiguing route is, but sometimes you're in a hurry and you got to go as the crow flies, right? But that could be dangerous. There's a little call out here, which is pretty important, right in this section, which my big head is covering. Basically, it talks about meaningful choice. It talks about how each available route, there should be a meaningful choice for the player. So in other words, if the northern woods are known to be infested with murderous orcs, that information should be given freely without requiring a travel lore roll. If an alternate mountain route is generally safer but extremely exhausting, that trade-off should be made clear as well. If a monastery known to be friendly to travelers lies along a well-trodden path, the party should be told about it. The reason for that is because choice matters. Everything in this game, not just in the travel section, but everything in this game is really about making difficult choices, right? is finding a compromise between two bad outcomes. Ultimately is what everything comes down to. So it's the same with travel. If you need to get to a certain destination, you're going to look at that map and you're going to know, well, there's many ways we could do this, but it's sort of contingent upon the GM to ensure that the players know the potential consequences of obvious things. If you know that the central forest that you want to get through is infested with bandits, the players need to know that, right? Because it's going to affect their decision. They might want to go around it, but of course going around it might lead them into difficult terrain, or it might just take longer or whatever, right? It depends on the context. So they plan the route and they take all of that stuff into consideration. And then the next step is travel lore. So travel lore is a set of temporary points that the players can use to help them. So what it really means is it's a pool of favor, and favor is points you can use to boost your skills, basically, that can be spent during the next leg of the journey exclusively by the guide, quartermaster, or scout on their official travel duty rolls. Track, survival, perception. And additionally, the other bonus of travel lore is that the party may spend up to 3 points of travel lore to modify the fatigue table roll, +1 per point. And you have to declare that before your roll. So the more you know about the road ahead, the more secrets you're able to find, the more shortcuts you're able to find, and the less fatiguing it's ultimately going to be, and the more likely your guide, quartermaster, and scout can be successful at what they need to know. Knowledge is power, after all. And then we've got some examples of what that means. And then we've got here. So then I do examples, careful examples for each step. So this is Simon Edbert. I think it's just, Simon Edbert and Arn are traveling from Boiseville to Marford. And I explain how this works, right? So they chart they plan their route here, and then here they make their travel lore roll, and what they discovered as part of a critical success, because sometimes you could find sort of secret things. As part of that critical success, they discovered that there's a safe area, which is like a refuge, a place to rest along the route, or somewhere along the route. So Simon, who's the guide, he makes sure he adjusts his route to accommodate for that, right? And then we get into the guide. And the guide's job is to lead the party as efficiently as possible, minimizing the number of track rolls needed to reach their destination. That is the point of the guide. The guide's job isn't to get you there faster necessarily, technically it is safer, but the real point of the guide is to get you to your destination with as few events as possible. And how it works is the guide makes his track roll, and on his success, the party's going to move a maximum number of hexes equal to half the guide's track score, which is the tens digit of his track. So if his track skill is 60, his scores, or half his score is 3, right? Because it's 60, the score is 6, half of that is 3, +1 hex per SL. Okay, and again, there's an example specifically of how that works. If he fails, he only moves half the track score. And at a critical failure, it's going to be a penalty to the fatigue roll, okay? So again, the idea is that you want a good guide who's going to get you there. It's not faster, because you can push, you can force march, but that's going to be more fatiguing. It's not faster, it's safer, right? The good guide is going to know how to avoid the events along the way, not in the same way as scout rolls perception to avoid like potential enemies or anything like that, but the guide knows the shortcuts. The guide knows the best way around things. The guide knows how to get there without anything befalling you. That's the purpose of the guide, okay? And yeah, so that's that. Now, I said before that there's options here for terrain-based movement rates, and that's what this whole page is all about. If you want a sort of more classic way of determining how far you go and based on terrain and stuff, this is what this is. I don't use this, but the option is there for you anyway. And there's another beautiful image of the red wastes here, which is very, very cool. Very, very cool. And then we'll get into the quartermaster next. But before we do, let's go to the phones and see where we're at. Really curious and excited about your game, Trevor. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Do the different Broken Empire's nations have varying tech levels that affect quality of roads, safety of travel, cleared lands, etc.? That will be largely obvious on the world map, but ultimately that is up to the GM to determine. I like that travel is an integral part of the Broken Empires. It would allow for branches of adventuring possibility. 100% true. Absolutely true. Again, as I've said before many, many times. For me, travel, like getting there is literally half the fun. Sometimes all the fun. So it opens up all kinds of possible adventure things that you miss out on if you just hand wave. Okay, a week later you get there, right? Which sometimes you can do, and it's necessary to do. In fact, I have options for that too in here. There's a section in the GM a chapter called Streamlining the Game, and one of those things talks about how to do that. So if you really hate the procedure of travel, you can either just do what you always do with every other game and say, a week later you get there, mark off a week's rations, or you could do sort of the streamlined version that I have that still incorporates some of the key aspects of the rules here as it pertains to the player characters. But we're not talking about the cheat version, the streamlined. We're talking about the real version, which is this one right here. Rock! There are many rocks along the road. Would a journey be easier a second, third time if one travels the same route more than once? It depends. I talk about that in the events as well. There's little sidebars that talk about the events, kind of dealing with this kind of stuff. Love the travel lore concept. I wish I could take credit for it. I'm pretty sure I borrowed this from the One Ring, or this general idea. Or maybe I made it up myself. I can't remember. I can't remember. Yes, avoid all the tourist traps. Exactly. Can characters become skilled to progress? Yes. So the guide uses the track skill. So the better you are at the track skill, the better the guide. Oh, I too am very excited for this game and its multiple shields. Yes, travel naturally generates side quests. Exactly. As you will see. Oh, will you ever see when we get to the event section? All right. Is the Hex version meant to be used for active exploration, where instead of traveling to get to the destination, you're actively searching around in the wilderness? Exactly correct. You can also use the Hex March system if you're just going a much shorter distance and you just want to make sure that, everything is sort of copacetic. But yes, that's exactly right. If you're just, hey, there's a big giant wilderness out there, we don't know what's there, let's just freely explore it, that's when you would use the Hex March system for sure. Okay, so coming back now to the Quartermaster. So the Quartermaster's job is to minimize fatigue taken along the journey, and specifically in that leg, okay? Their duty of finding nightly camps, managing ration stores, making good use of travel gear, hunting and foraging, etc., is abstracted into a single survival role. So we have here the fatigue cumulative modifiers table. These are all the things that are going to affect the fatigue table here, okay? So the Quartermaster is going to roll survival. And any SLs that the Quartermaster gets is going to act as a positive modifier on this table, as you can see here, plus SLs. Travel lore, you can spend up to 3 to get +1 for each one you spent. Now, there's a bunch of stuff in here that's going to affect things. If the guide critically failed their track roll, it's -3 because, you picked the wrong route, There's seasonal things if you're traveling in autumn or winter. There's a couple things that apply only to Hex Marches or only to Journey. These are here so that I didn't have to duplicate the table in 2 different parts of the book. Terrain's important. If you're going through desert, forest, or hill, it's going to be -2. And by the way, the wording is important here. If 1 or more hexes along the route were desert, forest, or hill terrain. So you don't know how long the leg is going to be until the guide makes the roll, right? You know that we're trying to get from here to here, and let's say it's 20 hexes, so 200 miles. You don't know how far that leg's going to be until after the guide rolls. The guide might move you 7 hexes. Okay, so we've gone 70 miles. So along that leg that we've already tracked, we look at the terrain. And if any of those hexes has these terrain features in them, the fatigue table is modified by this. So it's very, very important that the players are careful when they're picking their route. This is the reason why you get circuitous routes that go around lines of hills or go around mountains and that kind of stuff, right? But of course, the trade-off is it takes you longer, or maybe you're going into a more dangerous area. There could be all kinds of stuff here. Anyway, so terrain is a big thing. Also, for each major river, waterfall, ravine, canyon, cliff, or other major obstacle crossed on this route during the leg. So again, it's very important for the players to pick a smart route, right? It's very interactive for the players that way. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. If they force march, if they've depleted their rations, yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. And if traveling alone for solo players, they get a little boon of +5 because, gotta Gotta talk to my core audience out there. So the fatigue table, if you're on a journey, you're going to roll a d10. If you're on a hex march, you're going to roll a d20. Now, why is that? Because a hex march goes day by day. It's down to the minutia. So there's far more likely of an outcome that you're not going to take fatigue, right? Because you're probably not going to take as much fatigue over the course of one day as you would over maybe 4 days. That's why this is the difference there. This will make a lot more sense once you actually read the totality of the rules and go, oh, yeah, I understand about this. Anyway, a little call out here. Weary wounds in case you're taking... in case you can't take fatigue because your resolve bar is all filled up. Now you're going to take a weary wound, which is bad. So yes, theoretically, you can die on the road by walking yourself into the dirt. You can use rations while on a journey. So rations work kind of different on a journey than they do in daily time. So in this game, we have supply dice, okay? And rations are a supply die. D12, D10, D8, D6. So if you're in daily time every day, you don't have to mark off rations, but at the end of every day, you got to make a rations die supply roll. And if you roll a 1 or a 2, it decreases by 1 step. Okay, that's in daily time. So if you're traveling in daily time, which you would be doing on a hex march, at the end of every day, you make your rations. Okay, and there's ways to replenish rations on the road too. But on a journey, you don't have to worry about rations every day, because rationing of stores is abstracted into the quartermaster's duties. But if you take fatigue while on a journey, you may reduce that amount by 1 by reducing your ration supply die by 1 step. So you can actually draw upon extra rations to reduce the fatigue. But the danger with that is if anyone depletes their rations completely, it will penalize future fatigue table rolls and make things riskier for everybody. So over here, for each person in the party who has a completely depleted ration supply die, -1. So you really don't want to be burning through your rations on a journey like that, because it could get tough. But again, this is the resource management mini game, right? It's like, well, are we going to, how's our rations? This also means that if you start to run out of rations, you could choose to drop into daily time at the end of the sequence. But if you do that, there's all kinds of other consequences. So again, we'll come to that. All right. So let us go to, oh yeah, this is my favorite section now. Check for infection. Yeah, I was just looking at this what about getting lost sidebar. I have a whole thing here about getting lost. I despise rules that force the player characters to get lost. Now I know why they exist, because it's another risk of the wilderness. I get it. For me, I have never had a good experience, either as a GM or as a player, with getting lost in the woods. And I don't mean the players had a bad experience. I don't mean the characters had a bad experience. I mean the players had a bad experience. Because if the player characters are moving through the wilderness and they get lost, either they know they're lost because the players know they're lost, or they don't know they're lost because the GM is keeping it secret. And now the GM is to secretly track where the player characters are, where they think they are. So that's a lot of effort that in the end means nothing, because at some point soon the players are going to figure out, wait a minute, we're lost. And then all they're going to be is frustrated. Ugh. Well, that just wastes time, because guess what? They're going to figure it out and they're going to get back on track eventually at what? The cost of a day or two max, maybe some extra rations. To me, the ROTI is not there. The return on time invested is not there. So to me, I just dispense with that. The assumption is that getting lost is all wrapped up into the abstraction of those track rolls, of those survival rolls, and even to an extent, those perception rolls of the scout. And there is even an event, a specific event called Lost, right? But in general, to me, getting lost is nothing but an unfun pain in the ass. So it's not reflected here like it is in a lot of other games. Okay, back to the phones. Is there a mechanic built in if the party goes all Amundsen, eating the beasts of burden? No, that'd be on you to figure out if you want to eat your own horses. That's on you. All right. Foolcat, are these roles supposed to be split among characters on the same journey? So I said at the beginning that when you head out, you pick your roles and they the person who's doing that role does that role, but they can be helped by other people as long as that other person isn't doing a different role. And can characters switch roles on different legs? If they want, but honestly, that's rarely going to happen because in most parties, there's going to be the guy that's clearly the best choice for guide, the guy that's clearly the best choice for quartermaster, and clearly the best choice for scout. Now, if you have multiple people that are equally good, yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can switch them up. You can say, okay, well, you were the guy this leg. Now let's have Tom be the guy. I mean, sure, you can, but it rarely happens in my experience, right? Getting lost just feels like a waste of game time sometimes. Absolutely. In fact, not just sometimes. In my experience, all of the time. As I said, I've never had a positive experience with player characters getting lost in the woods. Never. I've had all kinds of incredible experiences of player characters dealing with situations in the woods, right? But specifically getting lost and thinking you're on the right track and then having to go back, and it's just not fun. Okay. Oh, so funny, Black Lodge. I just got here. Can you tell me in full detail what I've missed up until this point? Yeah. Okay, back to ones, everyone. Back to ones. No, obviously not. Oh, you. Why, I oughta. Okay, so let us get back to everyone's favorite section, checking for infection. So, actually, before we get into this, a lot of people go, infection, what is this? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's a pretty hardcore fantasy world is what it is. I first encountered beautiful infection rules in Harnmaster. Now, why did I gravitate toward this? Because in a lower fantasy world, in a more gritty world, I don't want to say grimdark. The Broken Empires is not at all grimdark. Gritty, yes. Lower fantasy, typically with some giant high fantasy elements to the world. But in general, the game is low fantasy and gritty and grounded. It's about people. It's about goals. It's about, that. It's like a soap opera, right? So because a gritty game has to have consequences for things, right? I mean, I believe any game should have consequences for things. So to me, infection is one of those scary consequences of getting into a fight that's way, way, way more scary than, am I just going to get stabbed and, because I could survive that. Sure, you could get stabbed. Now, in my game, as we've seen in the combat deep dive, getting stabbed is no small thing. Every time you take a wound, you have to make a toughness, or you have to make a wound die roll with your toughness against that wound value in the location. And if you fail, that location becomes impaired. So there's a very high chance with more and more wounds, sometimes even with small wounds if you're not very tough, that there's an immediate consequence, and that's impairment, which could lead to shock and possibly dying, right? So infection is just one more layer of consequences. If you get in a fight on the road, well, we fight a bunch of orcs, and I get stabbed. In a lot of other games, oh, well, okay, I'm going to give you a healing potion, you're fine, or whatever. Oh, okay, you're still wounded, but it doesn't mean anything in a lot of games. In this game, just like it is in Harnmaster, that's a big deal, which is why check for infection is its own step. If you are traveling with open wounds, a journey is a grubbing, tiring affair that prevents wounds from healing and places them at continual risk of infection. So, every leg, if the character has a wound, they have to make an infection die check or an infection check, where you roll this lovely green d20 that we have as part of the starter set, but it can be any d20. D20 infection die plus the toughness, and you compare the total to the character's total lethal wound points, both infected and uninfected. And if it's equal to or less than that number, then one of your wounds, the worst one, becomes infected. Now, if you have infected wounds, you have to also check for sepsis, right? Because again, it's abstracted. You're moving through the wilderness. Maybe 4 or 5 days pass, and it's at that point you realize you start to smell that. Oh, what's that smell coming from underneath the bandage, right? So you also check for sepsis if you have any infected wounds, and sepsis is really bad. Sepsis will kill you within 48 hours. And there's ways you have to deal with it. You have to drop into daily time. You got to try and purge infectant, all that stuff that we looked at in the wounds and healing chapter, right? But that's where that happens. And infection cannot be treated while you're in a journey sequence. And also you can't heal while you're in a journey. So the only way to deal with wounds is to drop into daily time. And you might think to yourself, well, why wouldn't you just do that? Because there are consequences to dropping into daily time, which we will see when we come to that section. All right. Let's go back to the phones. If you read about real explorers like Lewis and Clark, traveling through the wilderness was absolutely brutal. Yeah, that is for sure. For sure. Getting sick is not good. No, absolutely. All right. I go into my backyard and I get poison ivy like 2 out of every 5 times. I die almost immediately. As I understand the Broken Empires, the world is high fantasy, but characters suffer low fantasy. I wouldn't call the world high fantasy. The world is grounded, but there are certain high fantasy elements to it. But it is not a high fantasy world. It is not. It's not the Forgotten Realms. There's not wizards walking around blasting fireballs everywhere. There's not people flying around on magic carpets. There's almost none of that. As you will see in the magic section, if you try and do things like that against reality, again, the concept of the weave is the pattern, the tapestry of reality notices spellweavers trying to mess with it. And the more against reality your magical effect is, the more likely something bad is going to happen. And in fact, the really high magic things that have happened in the history of the world, which is discussed in the setting chapter, are entirely because spellweavers were messing with things they shouldn't have messed with. The whole notion of the Iron Veil, which separates the Iron Lands from the rest of the Broken Empires, that curtain, that magical curtain that separates that entire landmass, was done by spellweavers, which had huge ramifications to the rest of the world much later, right? So there's all kinds of things that there are high fantasy elements, but there's bad consequences for this stuff. So no, I wouldn't say it's a high fantasy world at all. It's just a gritty world with high fantasy elements. Okay. Are there weather rules for fatigue besides season? I mean, it's already incorporated in. Remember, we're talking about the journey here. The journey is abstracted over a long period. So weather is just one of those things that the GM can use to season. As we're about to see here in this section, describe the leg, okay? This is really important. This is, as I said, this is the most important part of the whole process as far as I'm concerned. Describing the leg is about describing that leg of the journey. But now that you've gone through these processes of you've gone through your travel lore, you've planned the route, you've got your travel lore, you've the guide has made his roll, the quartermaster's, you've checked for infection. All of these things could influence the description of the leg, right? So let me read this to you because I think it's quite important. So the parties moved a few hexes on the world map, possibly taken fatigue and risked infection and open wounds. Stop and take stock. What different terrain types have they crossed? What has the weather been like? Were there landmarks, oddities, or notable sights? How did any of these details affect the party's fatigue? And again, you know all of this stuff because of the previous steps. If someone's wound became infected, was it exacerbated by poor travel conditions, difficult terrain, or bad weather? So this is to say that weather is important, but you build it in after the fact. Now, in the Hex March, because the Hex March is day by day, weather can become a far more concrete thing, tool or a club you can wield against the player characters. But that's taken up in the Hex March rules. So I guess your answer, or my answer to you, Roll Rapide, is yes, there are weather rules. All right. So having a priest healer type character doesn't help so much during travel. You can, this is actually covered in the wound section. If you have a godbound who is willing to expend the favor of their god in order to heal someone, because not all godbound can do that, by the way. It depends on what the deity is. But if they're willing to do that, there's prices for that too. And that's actually described in the wound section and in the divine magic section. But yeah, the answer is yes. They can help during travel, just like a spellweaver can. A spellweaver who is well-versed in the healing arts, because they do exist, the spellweavers can also help. But remember, especially with spellweavers, if you cast a spell, there's a good chance you're going to have to expend resolve to control it. And you do not recover resolve on a journey, just like you don't heal on a journey. So you have to be careful. If you expend too much resolve, that's it, unless you choose to drop into daily time, which, as I said, has its own consequences. So everything is about the trade-off, right? So again, the answer to this question is yes, a priest can help, but there's always a trade-off. Do you want to take the time to do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All right, so let us go back. I have a big diatribe here about why you want to describe the leg and why you want to immerse the players and all that stuff. But all right, so then we talk about the scout. So the scout's whole job is to make the perception roll to see if they're surprised by what's coming. Now, this doesn't always, as I said, an event is not always a fight. In fact, most of the time it's not a fight. So the scout's perception roll can help either by adding a bonus to the first skill that the party uses in dealing with the event, whatever that is, to illustrate the fact that the scouts' scoutiness helped better prepare the party for whatever that was. They saw it coming, right? Or if it is a combat encounter, the scouts' SLs on that perception roll can turn into a bonus to each party's initiative roll for the first round. So again, it's a little boost, but it's up to the players to figure out how to use that. So yeah, that's how the scout's perception roll works. So it's pretty important to avoid, and again, if you critically failed, or if you just failed at all, you can't avoid the event, because a lot of the times, and this is you see a lot of this in games like Forbidden Lands. So in Forbidden Lands, which is a big like hex crawling game, when you're going through the wilderness, the version of their scout makes their roll, and if they fail, then they can't avoid the event. So it's the same here. If your scout is good, they make their perception roll, there's a very good chance that they could use those bonuses on the skills to avoid the event entirely. I mean, it's context-based. It depends what the event is. But if they fail, you can't avoid the event. You have to deal with it, and you deal with it without any bonuses. And if you critically fail, you're surprised by it. And if that's a combat situation, that's a bad outcome. All right. So now we get to the other big section, which is change to daily time or begin a new leg. So beginning a new leg is pretty obvious. If you're going through stuff and you've gone through the event and there's no reason to drop into daily time, you just start a new leg, away you go. Plan the route, travel, or if it's applicable, it's not always applicable, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's the thing about daily time. When you go into daily time, you want to do it because probably you want to rest or you want to explore, okay? So let's say that you are on a journey, and on your first leg, you have a combat encounter, and a bunch of people get wounded. So you think to yourself, well, they're wounded, which means on the next leg, when we get to that check for infection step, they're going to have to make infection rolls, and if they get infected, that's a problem. So you think, you know what? Let's actually drop out of the journey now and spend the night here in this arrival hex that we got there, and try and deal with these wounds. No problem, you can. But when you go into daily time, there is another little process that happens, and this happens every day, right? Typically, either you're on a journey or you're in daily time, right? Or you're in combat, right? But those are the three kind of general types of time that you have to track. Are you in journey, or are you in daily time, or are you in a fight, right? So in daily time, at the end of each day, first of all, you have to make a ration die roll, as I explained before. If there are any infected wounds, you have to make an infection check for that to see if those wounds have already become septic. A Queen's Hunt is only for replaced characters, so it probably won't matter to the majority of people, but it's there. Just as a reminder, the replaced are it was a special race that was added by the Kickstarter stretch goals. The replaced are humans, and they're exclusively humans, who were captured by the Dark Fae and enslaved. But they have now escaped through the thorns, and now they're back, but they're being hunted. They're being hunted by the Fae Queen, basically. So it's a little Changeling, The Lost in there. I actually wrote a TV pilot and a series Bible, which I almost sold, almost that close sold when I was still back in LA, that dealt with the replaced. Still a great script. Anyway, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to put it on TV. Let's put it in the game. So that's why there's replaced here. So this only applies to replaced characters. And then hostile encounter roll. This is another reason, this is probably the biggest reason why you don't want to just drop into daily time every time you can think of it. Because you have to make ration die rolls. You have to check for sepsis. If there's a replaced they have to make this Queen's Hunt roll, and the hostile encounter, okay? There is, depending on the safety level of the hex, which is another thing we'll get into, it's part of the event. Depending on the safety level of the hex, there's a good chance that something's going to find you in the night, and that something is not going to be good. Again, not necessarily a monster or a fight. It could just be some terrible thing that befalls you, some natural event, an earthquake, I don't know what. But you don't want that because that could hurt you. It could burn up resources. It could actually work against what you're trying to do right now. So that's the biggest timer, so to speak. No, that's not the right word. That's the biggest impediment to just dropping into daily time all the time. Because you don't have to deal with it if you're in a town, obviously. You don't have to make hostile encounter rolls every night if you're staying at the inn. But if you're in the wilderness, yeah, that's going to be a thing. So that's what you have to deal with. You do the rest and recover. That's after you sleep. You're going to recover both resolve and reduce fatigue based on the safety level of the hex you're in. And wound recovery rolls, these are really important. If you're wounded, in the next morning, you make a roll. And again, making a wound recovery roll, you are rolling per wound, right? Like we covered this in Chapter 11. And the danger with daily wound recovery rolls is if you have many, many wounds, or even if you have just one, but the number's not very good, the recovery rate is not very good. If you roll a critical fail on a wound recovery roll, which is, by the way, it's not an option. Every morning, if you have wounds, you make that wound recovery roll, hoping that your wounds are going to get better, right? But if you make a critical fail, that wound becomes infected, and now you got to deal with it. So infection is this looming threat that is just like always hovering in the background, waiting to sink its green, sickly claws into you. So you make those wound recovery rolls, and then you add 1 day to the journey totals. Now, all of this seems, oh God, it seems so pedantic. But again, like any procedure in any well-made game, once you figure it out, it just moves quick. You internalize it, and it just becomes really quick. Anyway, then we talk about the details of each. Ration rolls, infection die, Queen's Hunt, hostile encounters. There's provisions for keeping watch, for tending the wounded, for fortifying the camp, and then we talk about more about the hostile encounter roll. Now, these are taken from the event type by hex danger tables, which we'll get to. They're good to use for hostile encounters. So the GM decides, is it an ambush event? In other words, is it a combat event? Or is it some environmental hazard? Or is it something that the GM wants to make up on their own? It is entirely up to them. Okay. Oh, yeah, actually. And then we get into rest resolve. So this is the chart. So resting, you get back resolve and you remove fatigue based on the type of hex you're in. And the GM has a way to figure that out. He could just choose, or there's a chart, or he could look at the map or whatever. But basically, if you're in a safe area, like a civilized place, right? Or a refuge in the wilderness, then you're going to get back all your spent resolve, and you can remove up to 3 fatigue. If it's neutral, which is the vast majority of hexes, you can recover up to 3 spent resolve and remove 2 fatigue. If it's precarious, it's 2, 1, and dangerous, of course, it's up to 1 resolve and no fatigue. So bad idea to try and rest in a dangerous area. Then you make your wound recovery rolls and hope nothing gets infected and add 1 day, and there we go. And then there's a big, long example here, which is very good, that finishes the example that I've been carrying through the entire chapter. And then we will get into the Hex March here, but not right now. So that is the journey. I'm going to just skip over the Hex March now because I don't want to give away everything. But we will get to the events. But before we do, once again, let us go to the phones. I always loved it when playing Fallout 1 and 2. Great games. My God, the old sprites. Oh, the best. If you had a high enough perception, you had the option to enter the random encounter or not. Exactly. And that is why your scout is so important on a journey, because if their perception is good and they make that roll, you have the option to try and avoid it, right? You still have to try and avoid it depending on the context. But typically a good scout is going to give everybody a bonus to whatever skill they need to use to avoid the event. Typically stealth, but who knows, right? The event could be anything. All right. Never go abroad without your watch goose. Well, that's just good advice for anybody in life. Will a travel cheat sheet be on the Loom of Fate and GM screen? 100%. Yes, of course. All of these necessary things are on the screens, so you will have everything you need there. So Yes. Very, very good. Okay. So the event. Events could be their own chapter because it's a huge part of the travel procedure. An event is an encounter that the GM improvises to test the character's skills, goals, or anything else. It is randomly assembled from rolling 2 descriptor words, drawing inspiration from various aspects of the party's current situation, or consulting one or more of the included random tables, or all of these together. You don't have to improvise the event. If you want, you can make up a bunch of events beforehand, or you can draw upon the pre-made events that I actually include at the end of this chapter. There's a whole bunch of stuff to give you an idea of how these things might work. So you're covered. But the event is really great tools for the improvisational GM, because that's what I am. And I love to improvise things. So this whole chapter that we're going to see tells you how to create an event on the fly. Okay? It goes into quite great detail. I'm not going to get into it too much here. But basically, events, no matter the focus, are the backbone of a journey. They make the world feel dynamic and alive. Even a simple social interaction with a passing NPC may present the characters with new information or new choices about the road ahead. It could be simple or complex. It could be anything the GM imagines, okay? I keep getting pegged on, or pinged rather, on Discord. I just want to see if I'm missing anything. I did see. What am I missing? Anyway. Where are we? All right. You know what? This is bugging me. Where you go? Okay. So, building the event. When building or describing the event, the GM should consider one or more of the following: the danger level of the current hex, the terrain type, the weather. There's that weather again. Whether it's day or night, or you can use the scout's perception roll to determine that, as I talk about the perception, or in the scout section. Any character goals that could be challenged by the event. Then you roll 2 prompts. So these things, as you will see, these are basically many, many ways to skin the same cat. You can use as little or as much of this as you want, okay? For me, I would roll on the initial prompt table, which we will see right here. This is the initial prompt table. This looks a lot like a mythic or an oracle table, right? So the initial prompt, the first thing you might do, if you don't know what the event's going to be, because maybe you do have something specific in mind, right? Or maybe it's a triggered event, which is an event that you know is going to happen, and you plop it down. But I roll, 43, execute, and then the subject is 96. Vision. Execute vision. Well, if those are my prompts, I'm going to look at the context of the situation. I'm going to look at the terrain that the character's in. I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to look at the season. I'm just going to incorporate in that and execute vision. Does that mean anything to me? Yeah, right away to me, I might say a basilisk attacks. Right? Because a basilisk has the ability to, with its vision, to execute you. That's one interpretation, but it doesn't have to be that, right? It could be anything. It could be execute vision, like one of your characters has this goal that they really want to accomplish this wild, very, very ambitious goal. And execute vision could mean that something happens that allows them to move towards that goal, right? Again, it's all context-based, right? Or it could mean something else, right? These are just random things. So if that is enough for you to come up with an event, then great. You roll twice. There it is. It's a basilisk attack. Boom. I go to the bestiary. I pull the basilisk out. I stage a combat encounter. Where you go. But what if it doesn't do anything for you? Well, I don't really get anything out of execute vision. So instead, I'm going to go to my event type by hex danger. Based on the hex danger, which is either safe, neutral, precarious, or dangerous, I roll. And if I roll a 42 and they're in neutral, that's going to be a wary NPC. So I scroll all the way down to the wary NPC table. A person or group with unclear intent observes or interacts with the party. And then I can roll, if I need to, the type, the reason, and the potential consequence of this event. So maybe it's a reluctant informant. The reason is rumors, tales of monsters, thieves, etc. And the consequence is gains trust and offers minor help. A reluctant informant, so a spy, I would say. A spy, they encounter this person who is wary. Why are they wary? They're wary about rumors of monsters around here. Or maybe thieves. There's rumors of thieves around here, and this spy who's out by themselves is afraid that those thieves are coming after them because the thieves know that this person has something of value, right? And if the players help them, they could gain the trust of this person and they offer them minor help. For example, right? And then down here, roll on the NPC traits subtable in the bestiary section is neat. There's a whole section for NPC traits in the bestiary. I know I say bestiary. I know it's bestiary, but I like to be difficult. You can roll on that and come up with all kinds of details. Again, it's totally optional. Like, you don't have to do any of this, but all of these things are in here as fodder for you to create something in the moment, right? I love random tables, and I love things that trigger the imagination and allow a GM to shape something in the moment, or a player, if you're a solo player, to shape something in the moment. I love all these things. They're just really tailored and highly focused random tables, right? So that is that. And as you can see, like I said, there's a whole bunch of them here, which is kind of cool. And then, yeah, there's subtables here for sites. Like if you roll a site, okay, well, what's the site? It's a location with a type, condition, original function, and occupants with roles, dispositions, resources, and other features. This could be a dungeon, right? Use as many or as few of these tables as needed to develop the site, because one of the events that the players could come across is a site. Well, what's the site? It's a fortress, and the condition is it's been rebuilt, and its original function is record keeping. Oh, it's an old library. It's a fortress library. It's been rebuilt by somebody. By who? By healers. Oh, it's a library of healing, so that means it's probably connected to the goddess Elogia, okay? And what's their disposition? They're peaceful, seeking knowledge. This is looking very good for our players. What are the resources? Scavenged equipment. So they've gathered a bunch of stuff, maybe from the ruins of what previously existed here, and they're using it to help them in their research. And occupant, other feature, they're mutated and altered. Oh, that throws a wrench into things. I'm just grabbing things at random and putting together. So you could create a whole new thing just out of these tables, and I love it. That is my favorite part. And then, of course, there's the enemy subtable. If you want to completely randomize the enemy and you want duplicitous reptiles, or you want scared brigands, or you want traitorous spellweavers, all of that is here. Now, all of this stuff, not every combination is going to be represented in our bestiary. Our bestiary is limited. I can't come up with every conceivable thing. It's not a monster manual. I'm not Wizards of the Coast. I'm not going to have 3 different monster manuals. But I have a bunch of different creatures and templates in the bestiary, and advice for the GM to how to quickly create things on the fly. So again, as you get used to the game system, all of this becomes internalized, right? Because, you might look at this and go, well, that's really intimidating. I mean, reclusive reptiles, what does that mean? Is that a monster? I think it's a monster. Well, how do I stat that up? Well, if you go to the bestiary, it'll say, relax, man. Relax, guy. We got you. So then here we have a big, long event creation example, again, which talks about the event that Orange, Simon, and Edward have to deal with, and then there's some additional examples here. And then we get down here into pre-made events. This is my gift to you, so that if you're really stuck and you don't know, you can grab one of these pre-made events, which tells you the hex difficulty it's in, it tells you the randomizer words that were used to generate it, and it tells you the overall difficulty. Difficulties are kind of weird in this game because it's not a class and level-based game. Difficulties are just basically eyeballed estimates based on the skill level of the creature in question. But because it's not a skill or a class or level-based game, there's no there's a challenge rating so that these characters only ever encounter monsters that are appropriate. None of that. So a bunch of pre-made events, which are really, really cool. Some of these are tiny little campaigns to themselves almost. There's this great one called, where is it? Cabin in the Woods. I love this. This is a whole little mystery adventure here, basically. Anyway, so that is that. So going all the way back. This is a pretty long chapter. I think it's 50 pages. But as you can see, there's a whole lot of good stuff in there. So let me try and catch up. Where are we here? Whoa, I've missed a bunch of stuff. Hello, everyone. Am I too late? Yes, you're too late. You've missed it. Sorry. Critical thinking. Imagine that in this day and age. I know. It's such a demanding game. All right. It often happens that a triggered or random event becomes a bigger quest than the actual main thread. Such is the nature of random tables, yeah. And such is the wonderful possibilities of the open world exploration with rules such as this. All right. Tables galore! So very, very happy you have neutral and good encounters on your tables as well. It gets old very quickly when every encounter is negative. What about bumping into Bombadil or Faramir? That is such a great comment. There is a table in this book which I absolutely love, and for me, it encapsulates the kind of variety and things that you could be focusing on a journey that isn't we encounter another monster. And it is, let me find it here, it is the table called Scenic Moment. A peaceful or awe-inspiring scene providing respite and inspiration. Type, detail, possible effect. For example, at random, type is hopeful, shafts of light, open horizon, etc. Detail, notable sounds, birdsong, flowing water, etc. Possible effect, restores morale or resolve. An event could be like that scene in Lord of the Rings when Frodo and Sam are on their way to Mordor, or maybe they're in Mordor, and he sees the old statue that's been the statue of the king that's been defiled by the orcs. And just as they look at it, the clouds part and the ray of light shines upon it, and it illuminates the flowers that are growing around a crown. And Sam says, "Look, Mr. Frodo, the king has got his crown again." Mwah! I love that. It just ties it into the world. It makes you feel like you're there. It's so great. So yeah, not everything is a random encounter. I'm sorry, not everything is a random fight. All right. Yes, the very reclusive reptiles, the VRRs. Yes, the rodents of unusual size. In essence, the event phase is a solo scene that allows the GM to fill the world. Yeah, you could look at it that way. I mean, or you could just call it good GMing. All right. We know you're not Wizards of the Coast. You're Conjurer on the Beach. Another in-joke for those of you who've been following the channel. If you haven't seen the Conjurer on the Beach shorts on my channel, you should go check them out. I can't wait for your game to come out. So, cool. I'm pleased to hear that. So that is the travel chapter. There's a lot to it, but it's filled with beautiful art and cool immersive rules and procedures that are going to hopefully help you bring your players into the world. And not just the world of the Broken Empires, into the world of whatever fantasy setting you're using, right? These tables, there's nothing, or there's few things that are super specific to the Broken Empire, so really you can use this in many, many, many different settings, as long as they're generally fantasy, right? So, this might have been asked before, but do you plan on having the PDF only of the core rules to be purchased? Yes, eventually. That will happen. That will be available on the store eventually, in good time, as time goes on, as time goes by. Thank you, Trevor. Well, thank you, Agile Monk. Yeah, I am pretty happy with this thing. It's pretty cool. And again, I said this at the beginning, but let me reiterate that every single time I've run these rules with any group, you know, they're my people. They're not total strangers. But anytime I've run these rules with groups, it's always had the same effect. People have said, I feel, in the best way possible, I feel as exhausted as my characters are. I feel like I've been on the road. I can sense the fatigue that we accumulate, the things we have to deal with. I can feel the gargantuan distances we have to travel. I can see the forest. I can hear the river. I can smell the flowers. You know what I mean? And that's a huge compliment. But there's going to be people out there who go, oh, this is stupid. You just roll a bunch of dice. And if you're one of those people, well, then I can't help you, friend. I guess this isn't for you. But if you are on the fence about it and you're thinking, maybe this can work. Maybe I don't never do travel because I don't have any structure to help support things. Give it a shot. See if you like it. And again, this idea, like even if you don't like the Broken Empire's core system, if you know, I don't like D100 systems, I don't like all of your hit locations, all that stuff, but maybe, I don't know, you're running a OSE game and you just want something a little more meaty for your travel that isn't already covered by another publication like Dolmenwood or something, which is a very different travel experience. Then you might be able to go, you know what, I'm going to take these general ideas and just port them over. You absolutely can. That's what I did. That's, the whole core of this idea came from the One Ring and my years of experience by just, improvising travel rules in any game, So all of this can be used philosophically in any fantasy game. Well done. Thank you, Grognard. It's looking really good. Can't wait for the game. From what I've seen so far, this looks like one of the rule books that will be a delight to read from cover to cover. I get Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition vibes. That, Foolcat, is a giant compliment. Thank you very much. It's one of the things we were going for, not in terms of its atmosphere, because that is a dark fairy tale masterpiece work of art, but I wanted everything in one book. A lot of my people say you shouldn't do that. You should split it up into 3 books because it's cheaper to ship and you make more profit and yada yada yada. But nope, I come from the days when everything was in one book, which was the mid-'80s, and by God, that was one of the huge selling points of Warhammer First Edition for me. Was the fact everything was in one book, and I can find everything I need. And I'll tell you something else about that particular game. That was the kind of book you could flip through to any page, any given page, and derive inspiration for your next game, because it was just dripping with ideas. It was dripping with atmosphere. It was just a masterpiece. They don't make them like that anymore. I made it. I know I'm late. It probably ends soon. Yes, it ends soon, very soon, for I'm about to finish my malt liquor beverage, my non-alcoholic malt liquor beverage. One book to rule them all, exactly. This game seems more and more to assemble so much of the rules I was looking for. Longing? Well, I'm going to go with longing. Amazing work, Trevor. Amazing. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Completely agree. Yeah. Good. I'm pleased to hear that. It really is a labor of love, of course. I think my backers came on board because, I hope, it was because they were looking for something similar that, my designer, Nav, he says to me, only you could have done this. Only you could have done this game. Because this is an amalgamation of all of what I think are the best rules from the hundreds of games out there that I have played over 50 years, Well, not quite 50, almost 50 years. And I have the time and the inclination and the ability to put it together. So, yeah, he said only you could have done this. And the fact that there's so many backers out there that seem to be into the same thing, like we'd love to have these rules, philosophically taken from this game and, matched with these other games that are also philosophically taken from another system and see if it could work. Because this is kind of like, it's kind of the holy grail for a lot of people, right? A lot of people say, oh, I'd love to have Hornmaster, but with the special effects of Mithras. Well, that's kind of what I tried to do here. Now, it's not going to be perfect because nothing is ever perfect. It's not going to be perfect for everybody. Some people are going to love this. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to think, this is great, but I don't like this, or I'm going to take this aspect. That's the way we do it, man. That's what we do. So obviously, I hope that you read the totality of the rules and the whole book and go, this is all great. I love it. I'm going to run it exactly as this. But that's probably not going to happen. Let's just be realistic. Even I, who I've run so many games, and to this day, when I run a new game, I always run it rules as written for at least 3 or 4 sessions first. Always. Because I want to know what the designer's intent was. And I want to honor that intent. And I want to make sure that I am understanding the designer's intentions. Because a lot of the times you read something on the page and then you put it to the table and they are very different experiences. So if you read something and you go, oh, I don't like that, take it to the table. Because maybe it'll work. That's happened to me. Where, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see how that works. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that this intersected with another rule, and I didn't know that until I brought it to the table, right? So I always go rules as written first, but I always inevitably house rule because I'm a GM, like all of you GMs out there. That's what we do. The goal, the design goal, always, any designer anywhere is going to say, I really hope that this rule set is perfect for the people who play it, that they don't feel the need to house rule anything. But that's just not realistic. Of course it's going to be house ruled. But that's okay. All part of the deal. Yes, longing for the game. Good. Came in late. What's the game called? D&D 5.5 is what it's called. Or is it 6? I don't know. Can't remember. About to be sued by Wizards of the Coast. I've seen there's some paragraphs to give you options on the rules. I love that. Reading the design, or opinions on the rules. Reading the designer point of view. Thanks. Yeah, I do that a lot throughout the game. To not really explain why I do things, but to give you maybe a little more. Sometimes it's options, but sometimes it's here's why I did this. Right, like the whole getting lost thing. There's a section here which I think I've talked about. This section here. What about getting lost? And I have this whole thing. This is just me saying to you, I don't like the whole concept of getting lost, and here's why it's not in the game. Right. All right. I'm most looking forward to a simulationist game that's actually palatable to a non-simulationist player. Maybe. I mean, maybe. I hope so. It's funny because the whole sort of brand is sim light, and a lot of people, I think, hear that and they assume rules light, which it is not. The concept of sim light is it's a simulationist game, clearly, but it's light in that I pull back from the brink of too many rules, in my opinion, because it's all subjective, right? Too many rules for me might be not enough for you, or vice versa. But SimLight it's a simulationist game, but we then just pull it back a little bit to make it a little easier to parse. But it depends on you, right? Like some people are going to look at the combat and go, oh my God, this is great. Some people are going to go, I really wish I think you should have put more reach rules in there besides the way you did it. Because I really want that detail. Or they'll say, oh, you know what, I'm going to add in different damage types, slashing, piercing, and blunt. Okay, you can do that. I didn't do it because for me, that's just a little too much, and it's not in the interest of the ROTI, the return on time invested. Or some people are going to look at the combat system and go, I don't know, where's the D20? Where's the D20 in armor class? But I would submit that is probably not the target audience for this game. Looking forward to this book. Your game design choices align with many that I enjoy. Awesome. What, no strike ranks? Yeah. Strike ranks are from RuneQuest. Strike ranks, strike ranks are a perfect example of the kind of rule, in my estimation, my experience, that works great on the page. But as soon as you bring it to the table, it kind of goes, wait a minute, how does this? And I know some of you out there, big RuneQuest fans, and you're like, what are you talking about? It's the easiest thing. You just do this and that. That's fine. But in my experience with RuneQuest, strike ranks are great, theoretically. But every time I brought them to the table, my players went, okay, wait, but okay, who do we? Now do you? Now I? It's a huh? That section sort of reminds me of Gygax's random essays in the first edition DMG, but more focused on how it relates to the game, and not just here's an essay on here's an essay on polearms. Somebody's read the first edition DMG, I see. Hey, found Mithras because of you, and now learning it to run my personal universe with seems great. Yes, Mithras is great. Mithras was a huge inspiration on this game in many, many ways. I would say that probably the two biggest inspirations to this game were going to be Mithras and the One Ring. But there's so many aspects of other games in here that really sort of elevated away from just being another clone of any one particular game. Next video, the 87 different types of polearms. Great to hear about the travel. Awesome. I've never played a game that doesn't end up with enough homebrew that makes it almost a new game. Yeah, that is very common. It's very, very common. And Mithras was once RuneQuest 6. Yes, I actually have both of the printings of RuneQuest 6 before it was Mithras. Mithras is a great game. A great game. You should buy it. And you should also buy the Broken Empires. Is there a list of influences in the book? Yeah. Right at the beginning in the designer's notes, I go over that. I talk about, not in great detail or great specifics, but I do talk about the biggest games that were kind of, or the games that were the biggest influence on the design. I just want to make sure I don't miss any potential messages here from patrons or members or anything like that. Just give me a second. Dan Webb just became a patron. Woohoo! Hello, Dan. All right. Well, I don't see anything here, so I think we're probably good. Would like to buy this, but my country is not available for order. What country is that? Do tell. Maybe we can accommodate. Mythos Imperative and Classic Fantasy Imperative are also great. Download for free PDFs. That is also true. What's wrong with that go? Yeah, well, to a lot of people, it's a fine, fine system. Not really to me, but I gave up on the whole 2-hit versus armor class 0 and the whole armor class and hit points and levels and classes. I gave up on those many, many, many years ago. Oh, Slovakia. Is Slovakia not part of the EU? You know what? If you message us on the store, we'll see if we can do anything about that. I don't see why we can't, but don't take my word for it, because I don't know. I might be talking out of my butt here, but send us a message on the store, thebrokenempires.rpg.com, and we'll see if we can accommodate. I'm your biggest and most loving patron. Huzzah, huzzah. Okay, well, this brings us to an hour and 21 minutes, and I'm starting to lose my voice here, so I think we're going to call it there. But before we do, there's one more comment. When you say The One Ring was one of the inspirations, do you mean 2E? No, I do not, actually. I mean first edition. I'm about to do a review of Hands of the White Wizard, which is the latest supplement for The One Ring second edition. Beautiful supplement, great supplement. And I would probably never run it. And in the video, I will tell you why. Second edition to me, and again, I don't want to talk about this too much because I haven't actually played second edition, so I can't confirm this, but from what I have read and from my very, very thorough understanding of first edition, I see a lot of red flags. I see, not that the game is broken or anything like that, but the red flags I see in second edition One Ring is that I feel like they've nerfed the things that they shouldn't have nerfed, and they made too common things that should have been kept rare. That's my feeling on it, and I'm afraid that it's not going to capture the same tension that the first edition did so magnificently. It's funny, too. I just got my Warhammer Old World books, which I was singing the praises of. But the more I read these books, the more I think that despite the really cool systems that they have in place, I kind of feel like they kind of dropped the ball a little bit, which is a terrible thing to say because it makes it seem like I'm criticizing the game, and I'm not. But I am thinking that the new Warhammer, the Old World game, which is trying to do something different, it's set 200 years before first edition, that era, perfectly fine. But I can't help but feel like they kind of missed the boat a little bit on many of the things that actually make the old world. Some of the things that are crucial, things like risk of insanity and body horror and the notion of chaos and corruption and what that means, and just the feel of the art too. Like the aspects of the dark fairy tale are almost entirely gone in favor of a more realist approach, which I don't think works as well. But again, they're trying something different, so I applaud them. You don't want to just keep making the same thing over and over again, despite 6 editions of Call of Cthulhu before they finally changed things. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about that, but yada, yada, yada. Okay. After running 2E for some time, it does feel a bit on the easier side. Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it. The One Ring first edition is not perfect because no game is, but all of the things that I felt were lacking with that game, they actually addressed in the Adventurer's Companion. Now, this game's long out of print, so I don't know even where you'd get it. And I would never, never, never tell you not to buy anything from Free League because I think they're a masterful company and literally everything they make is fantastic. And including the second edition of One Ring. Don't get me wrong. The second edition of One Ring, where it absolutely shines, and I'll talk about this in the review of Hansel the White Wizard is the same. One of the same things that the first edition did was it absolutely gets Middle Earth, and it absolutely understands how to be respectful and accurate to the source material and to bring you into the way. When I'm reading second edition One Ring stuff, I feel like I was written by me. I feel like it was written by someone who gets it. Oh yeah, these guys get Tolkien, which is awesome. Because it makes me go, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not a crazy person. I mean, I might be a crazy person, but I'm not alone. What I like about the presentation of Tor 2e is that me, a 14-year native Greek-speaking son, could pick it up and run it no problem. For us, presentation is very good and structured. Yes. I'm not criticizing any of that. My criticisms with second edition just seem to be that I think they made it too easy. But I don't know because I haven't played it. So, blah, 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 blah. Okay, guys, that is all. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, the game is still available for pre-order at the BrokenEmpiresRPG.com. If you're interested, you can put an order in there, and it will ship with the first batch of the Kickstarter stuff. You won't get it before the Kickstarter, people, because my Kickstarter backers must get it first. And the digital files are coming, as I said at the beginning, sooner than you may think. So we're very excited about it. Things are going crazy good right now. We are just making incredible progress. The book is just looking like this beautiful thing. And yeah, we're all happy. So thanks for joining me, and I will see all of you next time. Farewell.